guys, and welcome back to RareRoo Crafts. It's Sarah here, and I am jumping on to show you some cogs that I have been making. So I'm just about to do my project for this month's Smash That Small Paper Pad, and I wanted some cogs, and I'd run out, so I made a few more, and then I thought you might like to see the process. So these are some of the ones that I have made. These are all made using embossing powder. They're all done with various heat embossing powders and techniques. And then I've also got these ones that are just drying that I have done a bit more grungy and a bit more, you know, to look a bit older and a bit more distressed. And I've been using some gesso, well, homemade gesso / texture paste. I've watered it down so that it has become gesso. So I'm going to go do these ones first, just because they're mucky and my hands are already covered in paint, and I've got my mat out, so I'm just going to show you how I do them. So I have taken some die cuts of cogs. I've got this set here, which came from Ali. So it's got lots of different shapes and sizes of cogs in it. And I've cut them out just out of cereal box. I've cut out 2 of each. Well, I've done it 4 times because I've done one lot of the embossed and one lot of the painted. But to make the actual cog, you need 2 pieces. So because I want it to be quite sort of sturdy, so I've cut it out twice and then glued it together just with a bit of tacky glue, so that I've got a nice sturdy chipboard piece now that is 2 layers thick. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take some homemade gesso. Now this is quite a thick gesso because it's a homemade one, but it doesn't matter too much the thickness of the gesso, it's just that you need to have plenty of PVA in it. And all I'm going to do is give it a coat of the gesso. So this one is a bit mucky. I'm just making sure I've got all the teeth and all the rest of it. Give it all a good coat, and then I'm going to give it a quick dry with the heat tool. As you can see, nothing too spectacular happens on that first coat. Just on the heat tool. But now I am going to go in again with a second coat. It doesn't need to be terribly thick, but it's this second coat where you're going to get a bit of a reaction with the heat tool. So if I go over it again, you can see that the gesso starts to bubble up, and that's what we want, because that, once it cools down, that's what's going to give us our texture. And if there's areas where you're not getting texture, or you just want more of it, just dab on a little bit more of the gesso and hold the heat gun on until it bubbles, like that. Now then, the only thing you've got to be careful of is if you overdo it, you sort of lose the teeth and the shape on the inside. But while it's still warm, you can just run around it with your fingers, and that'll bring back quite a lot of that shape. And you can push down on these bits, and you can see now, look at all the texture that we've now got on that cog. So it looks like a piece of wrought iron now. So there's a few ways that you can do it. You can just take a little bit of metallicy paint. So I've just got a bit of copper paint because it's on my mat. And you could just rub over the top like that. And that would give you that sort of wrought iron effect. And that's a really nice look. And I sometimes do them that way. Or the other thing that you can do, which I've been doing today, you can get a little bit of paint. Now I'm liking the silver best. I've been sort of experimenting this afternoon. I'm just going to try and find a clean brush. And just give the whole thing a bit of a coat of the metallic paint. This is just cheapy. I think this is the really cheap stuff from The Works, actually. Or is it? Oh no, this is an artiste. So a couple of quid in the range. Give that all a coat, and then if you go over it again with your heat tool, it makes it shine. and it brings out a bit more texture, and that metallic paint will bubble and blister as well. Now again, you could leave it at that point if you wanted to. It looks quite cool, just like that. You could go over it with a bit of black, you know, with a bit of the gesso, and that will bring out that texture. But what I've been doing is creating a bit of a rust type effect, and to do that I've just got, which I can't show you because it's down the bottom end of my mat, but it's just various shades of brown, orange and a little bit of red. And I just bring a little bit of that in around the cog, wherever I want it to be a little bit heavier, and put a bit more in. And then I'm going to come in with a bit of yellow over the top, just gently. I don't want lots of colour coming in. I just want to give the impression. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the red. Obviously, you can take your time over this. I'm just rushing it because I'm just showing it to you. But there you go. You've got that rusty sort of washer or cog look going on. And then these ones are all, I've done them with a bit of gold paint, and then I've just gone over the top with a bit of black gesso. And like I say, that gives you a really sort of rusticy looking cog. They look really old and battered, and you know, the sort of cogs that you'd take out of something and throw away. So that's those ones. Now I'm just going to pause while I go and put all my paintbrushes in the wash pan, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how I do the embossed one. Oh, okay, that was a bit of a messy job. So here's my other cog, and this one again is just 2 layers of cereal box cardboard cut and glued together to make a nice sturdy base. And for this one I'm going to use some VersaFine. I'm going to use, what embossing powders shall we go for? I will go for a goldy coloured one. Looking through me, I will go for the copper kettle, but I'm also going to show you putting a little bit of the verdigris on it as well, because that can make quite a difference. So all I'm going to do for this one to start with is with a clear embossing pad. So this is just the Spectrum Noir one, but you can use Versamark. You can see mine is filthy because I'm forever doing things like this. So you take your cog, press it down into your Versamark or your embossing pad, whatever it is you're using. Make sure it's well covered, it's well coated, and then I always just use a scrap piece of paper, pop my cog on there and pour on the embossing powder. I love heat embossing because it's like magic when it actually goes. Got black paint all over me, tweezers. So now I'm going to take that out, pop it there, and I'll pop my embossing powder back into my pot because I've got a terrible habit of knocking everything everywhere. And now I'm going to hold my cog in place, and I'm going to heat emboss it. So you've got to get the heat gun quite hot, and you'll see that it starts to go from the dull embossing powder to the shiny metallic of the melted embossing powder. So you could just do them all like that, and in fact some in my pot here I have just heat embossed them and then left them because they look really cool on their own, but I'm going to take this one a step further. So I'm going to bring my embossing pad back in, and I'm going to coat it in the embossing powder again, and then I'm going to pop it back on my paper again, and I'm going to add a little more of the embossing powder. Right, now this time, put this embossing powder away. I need to be ready with my stamp that I'm going to use. So once I've heat embossed this and it's all melted, I'm going to stamp on it. I'm using this stamp, which is just a, it's stamp skates. It's from 1993. I bought it in a charity shop for 50p, and I bought it because I just like the texture. It's like a sort of pear shape, but it's all little dots, so it creates brilliant texture on things. So I use it mostly for doing my cogs. So what I'm going to do is give my stamp a bit of a stamp in some VersaFine. That will help it to make sure that the embossing powder, the hot embossing powder, doesn't stick to my stamp, but it'll also put a bit of colour into where I'm stamping it. If you didn't want the colour, you could just dip your stamp into the embossing pad, but you do want to put it in something because it'll just help it to protect your stamp. And I wouldn't do it with my best stamps, you know, a stamp that I was attached to. Like I say, I bought this one for this purpose. So I'm going to heat emboss it again. Heat set. Once it starts going, it goes quite quickly. Now, you have to give it a moment, but not too long. You want it to cool enough so that it doesn't stick to your stamp, but not so long that it won't take the impression. And there you go. So you can see, if I hold that one up there, that has taken on the ink, which is really nice because it gives it that two-tone effect, but it's also taken on some of the texture from that stamp, so it makes it look a little bit distressed. So the other thing that I have done is to, once I've done that step, to dip it back into the pad again, which is why my pad is so filthy, and give it a very small dusting of this verdigris. And brush a little bit off here and there. I don't want it to be really perfect coverage. So this is a Ranger embossing powder, and it is called verdigris, and it's got all different sort of green tones to it. It does look a little bit like verdigris metal, but I quite like it over the top of a metallic embossing powder. I find it works really nicely. And then I'm going to heat set that again. Now, because you're heat setting over what you've just done, it will take out the actual texture that you've just put in with the stamp, because it's remelting everything, and it will remelt the layer underneath. So if you do want some of your texture back in, you do need to just tap your stamp onto the disc and onto the cog again. And there we go. Just a little bit warm, so I've smeared it a little bit, but that's fine. There you go. So now it's got some of that sort of verdigris, that copper and verdigris effect to it, which is really cool. And the nice thing about embossing powder is if you do make a little mistake, so if you can see there, I've just smudged it slightly, all you do is reheat it, and it will, the embossing powder will flow again. And then I'm going to give it a little. There we go. Fantastic. So that's my way of making various cogs from die cuts, and making them look really quite sort of old and vintagey, if that's the look that you're going for. Or like I say, you can just heat emboss them with metallic embossing powders. Like I say, I have done a few that I've done like that, and they will just look like metal. Some of them I've just done, I've only lightly stamped on them to give them just a little bit of distress, but not too much. And then others I have really gone to town with the stamping and the verdigris to get that real vintage effect on the cogs. So it just depends on what look it is you're going for and what the project is that you're doing. So I just thought I would come on and share that. I'm now going to go and actually make my ATC cards. So the video for the ATC cards will be up before this one. So if you want to see what these look like in a finished project, go and have a look at my Smash That Small Paper Pad video. for November. So that's it from me for now. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you so much for everybody that's subscribed. I have had a few new subscribers lately. I do massively appreciate it, and I'm really grateful for everybody that has mentioned my channel on theirs, and given me that little bit of a boost, because it is really lovely to think that there are people out there that are watching and, you know, might get something out of it. So that's it from me for now. I hope to see you all again in my next video, and take care. Bye for now.